Man uses all his savings to throw a party for friends and relatives, ends up with a surprise. Imagine going all in. Not at a poker table, but on people. One man just bet his entire future, every dollar and cent he ever saved on a single night. He threw the party of a lifetime, a spectacular display of generosity for his closest relatives and friends. He was betting on appreciation. He was gambling on love. But as the night wound down, he was about to get a return on his investment that no one could predict, a surprise that proves when you risk it all, the outcome is never what you bargain for. Hey, story lover! Welcome to the Narrative Hub, Reddit Stories. Believe me, this adventure gets wild, but it's only epic with you. Seriously, you make this possible. Want more stories? Greater adventure? Smash subscribe right now. Smash like. Comment below. Let's go. Adrian Brown had been staring at his bank statement for 3 hours straight. The numbers hadn't changed, but something inside him had. $27,463. That was it. His entire life savings, accumulated over 8 years of working double shifts, skipping vacations, and eating ramen more nights than he cared to count. Most people would see that number and think about a down payment on a house, maybe a new car, or keeping it safe for emergencies. But Adrian? He saw something entirely different. He saw a test. You see, Adrian had been feeling invisible lately. Not literally invisible, but that specific kind of loneliness that comes when you're surrounded by people who claim to care about you, yet you can't shake the feeling that if you disappeared tomorrow, life would just continue. His family group chat was always buzzing with other people's news, celebrations, and problems, but when Adrian shared something, the silence was deafening. His friends from college had drifted into their own worlds of marriages, kids, and career climbs. They'd respond to his text days later with generic, haha, yeah, responses that felt more obligatory than genuine. Even at work, he was the reliable one, the background player who made everyone else look good but rarely got the recognition. So Adrian hatched a plan that was either brilliantly generous or completely insane. Hey, Aunt Linda? It's Adrian. I wanted to invite you to something special this Saturday. The calls started on a Monday morning. Adrian had a list of 43 people, family members he hadn't seen in months, old friends from high school, college buddies, coworkers, even some neighbors he'd helped over the years. What's the occasion? Everyone asked. Just because, Adrian would reply with a smile they couldn't see through the phone. Life's short, right? I want to celebrate the people who matter to me. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Everyone said yes. Everyone seemed genuinely excited. Adrian felt a warmth in his chest he hadn't experienced in years. Maybe he'd been wrong about feeling invisible. Maybe people did care more than he thought. But Adrian had a secret. This wasn't just a party. It was an experiment. A final test to see what would happen when he gave everything, literally everything, to the people in his life. Tuesday through Friday became a whirlwind of spending that made Adrian's head spin. He rented the community center's main hall, $800. He hired a live band that his cousin Jake had recommended, $1,200. Professional catering from the Italian place downtown that everyone raved about, $3,400 for 43 people. Then came the decorations, the professional photographer, the premium bar package, the dessert station, and 1,000 other details that transformed his simple get-together into what could only be described as a wedding reception without the bride and groom. But Adrian wasn't done. He wanted this to be unforgettable. He commissioned personalized gifts for every single guest, custom photo albums filled with memories they'd shared together, handwritten letters expressing what each person meant to him, and small but meaningful tokens that showed he'd been paying attention to their lives in ways they probably hadn't realized. By Friday afternoon, Adrian was staring at a bank balance that had dropped to $437. The math was simple and terrifying. He'd spent over $27,000 on one night. His hands were shaking as he drove home from the final vendor meeting. What had he done? This was either going to be the most beautiful gesture of his life, or the most expensive mistake he'd ever make. The community center had been transformed into something magical. Soft golden lighting cast a warm glow over elegantly set tables. The live jazz trio was warming up in the corner, their smooth melodies already setting the perfect mood. The catering staff moved like choreographed dancers, putting the final touches on a spread that looked like it belonged in a five-star restaurant. Adrian stood in the center of it all, wearing his best suit, and felt a mix of pride and terror that made his stomach do backflips. At 6 o'clock sharp, the first guests arrived. His college roommate Dave walked in with his wife Melody, their eyes going wide as they took in the scene. "Adrian, dude, this is incredible." Dave grabbed him in a bear hug. "What's all this for?" "Just wanted to bring everyone together," Adrian replied, his practiced response rolling off his tongue. Within 30 minutes, the hall was filled with laughter, conversation, and the kind of energy that made Adrian remember why he loved these people enough to bet everything on them. His Aunt Linda was crying happy tears as she looked through her personalized photo album. His neighbor Mrs. Trump was showing everyone the custom garden stone he'd made for her with her late husband's favorite quote engraved on it. Even his typically stoic brother Tom seemed genuinely moved by the handwritten letter Adrian had given him. The band launched into a set list that Adrian had carefully curated, songs that held memories for different groups of people. When they played Sweet Caroline, the entire room erupted in off-key singing that sounded better than any professional choir. For 3 magical hours, Adrian felt like the most important person in the world. This was it. This was what love looked like. He'd been wrong to doubt these relationships. The money was worth every penny to see pure joy on the faces of people he cared about. But then, something unexpected happened. At 9:30, just as the dessert course was being served, the community center door opened with a loud creak. Every head in the room turned to see a woman Adrian didn't immediately recognize, elderly, walking with a cane, wearing a simple but clean dress that had seen better decades. She paused in the doorway, her sharp eyes scanning the elegant party with obvious confusion. "Excuse me," she called out in a voice that cut through the background chatter. "I'm looking for Adrian Brown?" Adrian felt every eye in the room shift to him. His face flushed as he walked over to the woman, wondering if she was lost or if there had been some kind of mistake. "I'm Adrian," he said gently. "Can I help you?" The woman studied his face for a long moment, then broke into a smile that transformed her entire appearance. "You don't remember me, do you?" she asked. "I'm Mrs. Patterson, from Riverside Elementary. You were in my 3rd grade class." Adrian's breath caught in his throat. Mrs. Patterson, his favorite teacher from 24 years ago. The one who had encouraged his love of reading, who had stayed after school to help him with his math homework, who had been the first adult to tell him he was special. "Mrs. Patterson," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "What? How did you?" She gestured toward his cousin Amy, who was standing nearby looking both proud and slightly mischievous. "Amy called me yesterday," Mrs. Patterson explained. "She tracked me down through the school district's retired teacher database. She told me about tonight and said you'd mentioned me once as someone who'd made a difference in your life. She thought you might like to see me again." Adrian felt tears welling up in his eyes. He looked around the room and realized that the conversation had gradually stopped. Everyone was watching this reunion with curiosity and warmth. I can't believe you came," Adrian managed to say. Mrs. Patterson reached into her purse and pulled out a small wrapped package. "I brought you something," she said. "I've kept it all these years, hoping I might see you again someday." With trembling hands, Adrian unwrapped the gift. Inside was a small journal, the same one he'd used to write stories in during 3rd grade. The cover was worn and faded, but he recognized his 8-year-old handwriting immediately, Adrian's storybook. You left this behind on the last day of school, Mrs. Patterson explained. I always meant to get it back to you, but by the time I remembered, you'd already moved to the next grade. I've carried it with me through 5 different schools and into retirement, always hoping our paths would cross again. Adrian opened the journal and saw story after story written in his childish scrawl, adventures about brave knights, space explorers, and magical creatures. But on the very last page, he found something that made his heart stop. In his 8-year-old writing, he'd written, "When I grow up, I want to bring people together and make them happy. I want to throw big parties where everyone feels special and loved. Mrs. Patterson says I have a gift for making people smile." The room had gone completely silent. Adrian looked up to find 43 pairs of eyes watching him, but for the first time all evening, he wasn't performing or hosting. He was just being seen. "I remember now," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I remember telling you that. I remember you saying I had something special inside me." Mrs. Patterson nodded, tears now streaming down her cheeks. "And look what you've done," she said, gesturing to the beautiful party around them. "Look at all these people you've brought together. Look at the love in this room." That 8-year-old boy kept his promise. What happened next was something Adrian would remember for the rest of his life. His cousin Amy stepped forward first. "Adrian," she said, her voice shaky with emotion, "I have something to confess. When I tracked down Mrs. Patterson yesterday, I also made some other calls." Adrian felt a knot forming in his stomach. What was she talking about? Amy looked around the room, making eye contact with several other guests who were nodding encouragingly. "We know," she said simply. "We know what this party cost you." The knot in Adrian's stomach turned into full-blown panic. How could they know? He'd been so careful to hide the expense, to make it seem effortless. His brother Tom stepped up beside Amy. "Your neighbor Mrs. Trump mentioned seeing all the delivery trucks at your apartment this week. The rental company guy is married to my wife's sister. The caterer's daughter works with our cousin Jenny. In a community this size, word gets around." Adrian felt like the floor was disappearing beneath his feet. This wasn't how this was supposed to go. This wasn't part of the test. But then his college friend Dave spoke up. "We also know why you did it," he said. "And we've been talking." Dave pulled out his phone and showed Adrian a group text thread titled, "Adrian's Angels." The conversation history showed messages going back 3 days, his friends and family coordinating, planning, discussing. "None of us realized how much we'd been taking you for granted," Dave continued. "You're always the one who remembers birthdays, who checks in when someone's going through a tough time, who shows up when anyone needs help. But we've been so caught up in our own lives that we forgot to show up for you." Adrian's vision was blurring with tears now. This wasn't the surprise he'd expected. This wasn't part of any plan. Amy reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. "So we took up a collection," she said. "Not just to pay you back, though there's enough for that, but to show you what you mean to all of us." She handed Adrian the envelope. Inside, he found not just cash and checks, but something much more valuable, letter after letter from every person in the room. His Aunt Linda had written, "You drove 4 hours to help me move after Uncle Ray died, and you never once complained or asked for anything in return. You have the biggest heart of anyone I know." His coworker Jennifer wrote, "You've covered my shifts 6 times this year when my kids were sick, and you've never made me feel guilty about it. You're the kind of person who makes the world better just by being in it." His old high school friend Mike had written, "Remember when my dad was in the hospital and you visited him every day for a week, even though you barely knew him? He talked about you until the day he died. You were more than a friend, you were family." Letter after letter, story after story, each one revealing moments of kindness and generosity that Adrian had given freely, never expecting recognition or repayment. But the last letter in the stack was from someone Adrian didn't immediately recognize, Mrs. Patterson. My dear Adrian, she had written. In 37 years of teaching, I've watched thousands of children grow up. Most I lose touch with, but some leave marks on your heart that never fade. You are one of those children, not because you were the smartest or the most talented, but because you had something rarer than intelligence, genuine kindness. I've kept track of you over the years through mutual connections. I know about the scholarships you've quietly funded for kids in your old neighborhood. I know about the elderly man whose groceries you've been paying for at the corner market. I know about the animal shelter where you volunteer every weekend, and the youth mentoring program you started at your old high school. You think you threw this party to test whether people love you. But Adrian, the question was never whether you are loved. It's whether you can finally see yourself the way the rest of us have always seen you, as someone who makes the world brighter just by being in it. As Adrian finished reading, he looked up to find something he'd never seen before. 43 people watching him with the kind of love and admiration he'd spent years hoping to earn, not realizing he'd already earned it 100 times over. But the surprises weren't finished. His brother Tom stepped forward with a folder in his hands. "There's one more thing," Tom said. "We didn't just collect money. We collected information." He opened the folder to reveal a business plan, complete with financial projections and partnership agreements. You've always talked about wanting to start an event planning business that focuses on bringing people together for meaningful celebrations. We want to help you do it. Not as a charity case, but as investors who believe in what you can build. Adrian stared at the documents in shock. Dave continued the explanation. "Mrs. Trump has commercial real estate connections. Amy knows marketing and social media. I can handle the business and legal side. Jennifer has catering industry contacts. We want to be your partners in this." The elderly teacher, Mrs. Patterson, spoke up from her seat. "And I want to be your first official client," she said with a twinkle in her eye. "I'm planning my 70th birthday party next month, and I can't think of anyone I'd rather have coordinated than the boy who promised me he'd spend his life bringing people together." The true return on investment. As the evening wound down and the last guests were saying their goodbyes, Adrian found himself standing alone in the center of the community hall, surrounded by the remnants of the most expensive night of his life. But as he looked at the envelope full of money, enough to not just replace his savings, but to actually start the business his friends and family wanted to help him build, he realized he'd gotten his return on investment after all. He'd bet everything on love, and love had won. Not in the way he'd expected, not through gratitude for his grand gesture, but through the quiet recognition of 1,000 smaller gestures he'd never thought anyone noticed. The real surprise wasn't what people gave him back. It was discovering that he'd never stopped giving in the first place. Adrian pulled out his phone and started a new group text with all 43 guests. "Thank you for the most amazing surprise of my life," he typed. "But I have one more question. Who wants to help plan Mrs. Patterson's 70th birthday party? I have some ideas." His phone immediately exploded with responses. 43 people, all eager to be part of whatever Adrian was planning next. As he turned off the lights and locked up the community center, Adrian realized something profound. He'd spent $27,000 to learn that he'd been rich all along. The gamble had paid off in ways he never could have predicted. He'd risked everything on people, and people had proven that the investment was worth infinitely more than money. Sometimes the biggest surprise isn't what you get back when you give it all away. Sometimes it's discovering that you never stopped giving and the people around you never stopped noticing. 3 months later, Adrian Brown's event planning business, bringing people together, had a 3-month waiting list and had already coordinated 12 celebrations that left their hosts feeling exactly the way Adrian had felt that magical Saturday night, surrounded by love they didn't know they'd already earned. And Mrs. Patterson's 70th birthday party? It was absolutely perfect. Just like Adrian always knew it would be.